Hello, everyone. I'm Adrienne Davidson Helgerson, and I'm the Director of Operations at the Davidson Institute. It's an honor to welcome you all to our webinar focused on exploring the profound concept of heart coherence. At the Davidson Institute, our mission is grounded in extensive research and a deep understanding of the importance of human connection in the healing journey. We recognize that trauma affects not only the mind, but also the body, and our program integrates both somatic and cognitive approaches to address these complexities. Today, we're privileged to have Dirk Terpstra join us. Dirk is a distinguished expert in heart math and heart coherence, and we're excited to dive into this topic with him. Dirk, thank you for joining us today. I know that you've been busy all morning with our veterans, so I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, so let's just jump into the discussion and just take off wherever you'd like.
Yeah, good morning, Adrian. So good to see you, and so good to have everybody with us. I'm very grateful to be able to participate here. I'm still a little bit in the really good state of working with the group this morning. We had such a profound connection in terms of getting a discussion going about the challenges that they experience most in their lives, and we talked about the fact is how community is so important for all of us. And then I think like, yeah, we are a community of cells, literally. Our body consists of 50 trillion cells, and often we think we're so separate. And
Mhm.
the knowledge and the scientific research that we've been doing at the HeartMath Institute for over 30 years, we begin to better understand what is it that make us connect with other human beings, but also what is it that can make us connect with our deeper part of ourselves, which is usually our hearts. And that's what all the research is about. And I have memory of last week's talk where we dove a bit into the science of what does it mean, to be coherent, and what does it do for us.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah, so I wonder if we could maybe just provide a little overview of what HeartMath is and how it works before we get into a more advanced conversation.
Yeah. So the interesting part and how it came onto my path, I was interviewing people at the time, and I got to spend time with, first of all, a scientist. His name is Greg Braden, and he was brought in the importance of heart intelligence. And after that, I was interviewing the CEO of HeartMath, Howard Martin, and I got really excited about, and it made sense for me to deeper understand a part of life, but also bringing in the science. And I guess I especially enjoyed the scientific part for my mind to better understand, how life works. And so he was explaining about how the rhythm of our hearts actually determines the messages that go to our brain, and how the brain then releases certain chemistry in the body, and then we feel differently, and based on that feeling we get into action in a certain way. And it's not just for people with trauma, as we often focus here on, but it's also for people to achieve better results, let's say in their work, in their careers, in the corporate life, maybe as athletes, or high performance anyway. And so I got so inspired by that I thought like, yeah, I want to go there. And they said like, why don't you come over, to the Redwood Forest in California and join us we train you. And so I did that, and I learned that the rhythm of our heart is some of the most profound and important elements in our entire physiology, because it's the driver behind the way we feel, the thoughts that we have, and the actions that come forth, of these processes. And I wanted to learn more about the intelligence behind all of that, and that's how I got myself into this. And the simple way is that we all of the spiritual teachings, all of the mindfulness approaches, all of the self-help industry, which is an incredible multi-billion-dollar industry, but then in the end to bring it back to yourself and say, but there lives an intelligence inside of me, and I actually want to learn to access that part. And so what we know from neuroscience is that where the attention goes is where we also energize something. And that is a concept that's not really well understood. We kind of know it, but at the same time, we don't. Because we are, in general, in our society, we complain about things and we look at the news and we think, it's bad and people are bad, or people do silly things or stupid things. And so our thoughts go to the things that are not right in this world.
Mhm.
But then if you really understand the principle in neuroscience, that means is that where the attention goes, obviously, is also where the energy flows, which means is that we actually keep alive the things that we actually do not like at all and that we would like to change. So in order to change something really in our lives, and or in the grander scheme of life, is that you want to have your attention and your awareness go to the things that really matter to you. And that's culturally not being handed to us in that way, and that's often why it's such a
Mhm.
challenge. But at
Mhm.
the HeartMath Institute, what we do is we begin to realize is that when we bring awareness to our hearts, and also we have last time we approached the practice of different breathing, but also how we change our emotional state, and we bring intentional things into our awareness that really matter to us, that we literally create in our lives these things that we give awareness to. And that's
Mhm.
in very short, that's what the HeartMath Institute researches. But it also
Mhm.
means is that we can change the activity of our nervous system, the rhythm of our heart, the way our brain expresses itself and functions in a more coherent way, or it becomes sometimes our enemy, that we don't want to be up there.
Mhm.
And so we have the capacity to change all that in our physiology. And that's, of course, a very empowering thing.
Mm, beautiful. So, how would you contrast that with like a cognitive therapy such as like CBT, where it is similar in some ways because you're telling people to, pay attention to their thoughts and identify, negative automatic thoughts, and you're saying that where your attention goes, the energy flows. So, how would you contrast this the heart math approach to the cognitive approach of trying to basically focus on the positive, like positive psychology, and yeah, it doesn't really explain the science of how it affects your body, but the premise is you focus on the positive thoughts, you'll see more of the positive things in life, and you'll feel better. So what's the difference between those two?
Yeah, I love that you asked that. And of course, it's an excellent question to ponder on, because, of course, when we focus on the positives in life or the possibilities in life instead of the impossibilities, we literally start creating more of that. So our brain is really, really powerful. But where heart coherence comes into is that you want to, let's compare it to, related to your question, let's compare it to using your muscles to run a marathon, to the muscles in your legs, or to climb a mountain. And you say, the harder I climb, the farther I come, or the better time I have, in running a marathon. But you want to prep your body first.
Mhm.
And you cannot just go and run with all of the best intentions. Well, you could, but it's probably going to be very, very hard, and you won't achieve the best time, and you probably going to regret it a lot after, because you never prepped, you didn't have the right nutrition, and so you want to be knowledgeable about that, and you want to really
Mhm.
prepare. It's the same with a career. You just don't dive into that and focus on the things that you love in your career. And so what heart coherence does, it preps, related to your question, it preps the brain to be more coherent. And then what does it mean to be more coherent? It is more um, functional in that way, is that the brain often, with our thinking based on our cultural programming, we have been taught to think about all possibilities, and we have worries about so many things, what can go wrong, and we have a lot of regrets maybe of things, and so our brain is often very not in a good place to use to its fullest. And so what you want to do is you want to actually prepare your brain that it's in the best possible state to use it as a gift of this creation, because there's nothing wrong with your brain. But people often say you have to be your heart, your brain is my enemy, and it always takes me to things that I don't want to go to.
Wow.
But when you change the rhythm of your heart, and maybe we should pay a bit more attention to that, how we can practice that, and how we can achieve that when we change the rhythm of our heart, which we measure with instrumentation. We can see literally where the way our heart beats. When we change that, we know from research is that that data that comes from that beating heart, that is being transported through the vagus nerve, and it's being entered into the brain, and the brain receives that as instructions, because that's what the brain is really for. A part of the brain is to make sense of the world around us, to keep us safe. And that's why we have all of these mechanisms out of survival. But if based on our past, if we have experienced so many of these deep, intense, challenging situations, that our brain maybe is only idling at a survival, in a survival mode, and then the brain is not very helpful. And then you could say, I want to think positive thoughts, but then the brain keeps hijacking that. It says, what are you thinking about? You're not even worth about thinking positive thoughts. Who do you think you are? And so we have all of these elements coming forth. So we want to prep the brain. And we do that by starting into the heart and change the rhythm of the heart. Then the brain receives literally, and this is the cool part of science, the brain receives instructions and say, we are safe. We are ready to be functional because the nervous system relaxes. And then the brain is actually becoming more whole, more open to process all the information that it needs to process. And once you do that, and then you say, I have a feeling when I put more care into, let's say, my family, or into the workplace that I live, and I feel that care for other people, then we see that the brain becomes so relaxed that it becomes also functional. And now you give the brain a certain task, and then the brain can just execute it very quickly. And so, with an intentional way, what you're saying earlier, like positive thoughts, what we do is we come from a bit of a deeper place. You and I talked before about the difference between setting goals and having intentions. And for me, an intention personally is a little deeper, is something that really, really matters to us. We were doing this morning with the group of people that I work with, and we say, what are the pillars in your life that when you feel these are just the elemental things in your life? And people came up with, well, it's my community, it's my health, it's my contribution. And so we started building on those pillars. And these were not merely goals, but they were being felt really deeply.
Mm.
And the more we can prep the brain for being very functional, then it's easier to go to the place what you described. And I realize it's a very long answer to your short question, but it's a bit of an explanation of how I personally see the interaction between the brain and the heart, and how deeply they're integrated and work together.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining all of that. I mean, I think it's worth a well described answer like you just gave us. But it sounds like it's kind of there actually are like cognitive behavioral elements to it, but it's like setting the groundwork for that to be actually effective and facilitating those cognitive processes that we all have and that can be really helpful or harmful. Like, the HeartMath talks about renewing and depleting thoughts or emotions. And so it's interesting. It seems like it's more of a spiritual, but also scientific approach to life as opposed to a therapy that's just done in a clinical setting. And it touches so many things like the cognitive aspects, but Yeah, it's very interesting.
And it's so interesting where you said like it's almost like a spiritual approach, because I had a mentor for many, many years. I was closely connected with him, and his name was Wayne Dyer. And he was seen as the spiritual like godfather. He was very wise, and he said like we have a human body. Sorry, we are a spiritual being, but we live temporarily in a human body, and so we don't like to admit that, because in our cultural thinking, often people think of spiritual as something that is really out there. Maybe it's religion, or maybe it's something that is people start getting a little bit out there, woo woo. And then when you look at and all the interviewing that I've been doing with researchers and scientists and quantum physicists, at some point you reach the level where you cannot find it any longer in the books. And then you said, but we do experiments and we see results that we cannot find in the books. This is when, for example, Edgar Mitchell, he was one of the hardcore scientists, physicists. He was an astronaut. He was the fifth man walking on the moon. And so he was trained in all of his left brain. And then he is there in this space, whatever, station or rocket or whatever you call it, and he's there, and he sits there after being walking on this surface of the moon, and he sees the moon, and he sees the sun, and he looks at the earth, and he has this everything in panorama. And that, he says, they call that samadhi, feeling with your senses. And suddenly something woke up in him as this hardcore scientist that he couldn't explain any longer in science. This is where people embrace religion so much. And we often we wave it away as something maybe insignificant, but it's actually really important. And so I found that the scientists who dig deeper and deeper and deeper, they see so much resemblance and overlap between the spiritual aspects of who we are and the science and the physics. And if we are willing to look at that, then we actually are going to a next step in our evolution. And this is what I've been seeing, working with these highly trained military, former military people, but also working with airline pilots who have been under so much stress because the airspace is so busy. They've been flying through multiple time zones, and then now they get from the tower the information that the weather is really bad, and that they feel that it affects their decision making. And so if you can self-regulate that whole system, that nervous system that start kicking in and say, oh, what if? But obviously with 300 or 400 people behind you and being in this airplane, you want to make smart decisions that's safe for
Mm-hmm.
everyone. And so that is another extreme. So we can use it in so many ways so that it supports us. And yeah, I don't exclude, definitely not, that deeper spiritual element in there, if we're willing to face that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, something that I've been wondering about recently, which is maybe a little bit of a segue, but um is this concept of like self-regulation and being in balance all the time, and being like, if you're really truly doing the practice right, nothing is going to phase you. You're going to be in control. Something terrible can happen and you will, you know, uh, be very just in control of the situation. Is there ever a place for anger and you know big expression of emotions if you're using the heart math practices in daily life and doing it well and properly?
Well, again, I really like that question. Look at the world that we currently live in. Just go to a party and just observe everyone there. Just watch the news. Just look at people around in the town here, for example, where we live. Then it seems that people are being ruled by their emotions, and it's often survival emotions. So much so, we are so easily angry about things. We are anxious. We are uncertain about things, and we live by all of these emotions being propelled, by the news and by our culture. And we have to have security, and we have to have this. That people barely feel these moments where they can feel really calm and to make smart decisions. So heart coherence is not about always being in this perfect harmonious state, but it's more an antidote to what people seem to live in most of their days and get tired of that. And also makes them even more anxious because they feel they don't have a grip on the things that really matter to them. They want to make changes in their lives, or they want to build a certain career, but they're so busy all over the place in their heads that they feel that they're being hijacked. And therefore, of course, when somebody is really, let's say, right in your face and does something that is very disturbing, you have a good reason to be anxious or to be angry. And we can express that and say, hey, this is the functionality of living our emotions.
Mm.
But what I work with is people that have used certain emotions so much so that it becomes ingrained, it's part of their pattern, and they don't know how to interrupt it any longer. And so these emotions, which are usually survival emotions, they are hijacking their well-being. And when they begin to realize that, say, give me a tool. It's not that I always want to be in a perfect harmonious state. It's not that I can always never can be angry anymore or sad or cry, whatever. It's more like I want to have a way that when I need to be at my best, I want to be able to use certain tools and techniques. Does it make any sense?
Hmm. Yeah, and it lends itself so well to I think it was a parable that my dad, the founder of this clinic, he it was so important to him, and he got it from the indigenous community, of probably an indigenous healer somewhere. He actually, when he was sick, the local indigenous healer would come over to his house, and first he would do a cold plunge in the lake because my dad lived on the lake, which was so interesting, before the whole phase of hot cold therapy. But and then he would come and he would bring my dad all these different herbs and things to heal him. So he was really connected to our traditional indigenous like healing practices. And there's this one story that was really important to him, and it's that we have the good wolf and the bad wolf inside of us. And one is full of, truth and benevolence and love and joy, and the other one is resentment and hatred and anger and all of these bad things. And it was like, and they're fighting, and the question is like, which wolf wins? We have these two wolves within ourselves, and which wolf wins? And the answer, the parable goes that it's the one that you feed. And it lends itself so well to the heart math concept. It's like you said, not allowing it to have control over you, but still being a human being and having normal human being reactions, but just not letting it like control your life anymore, kind of taming the wolf within. So I really like that.
Yeah, and of course I love that parable, and it's indeed it's such a parallel with of course what we just talked about, and to there's this fine line, in the more Chinese wisdom you have the yin yang, and you have this beautiful symbol, and you see the dark and you see the light, the black and the white. And then we could say I don't know, I'm always lingering, in this dark and this black part. And some people always want to be really in this beautiful white and don't even want to look at the dark. And both are not really functional. But if you can walk that fine line between the dark and the white, and we kind of cross over, and where we see it, but we have the tools and the capacity not necessarily to linger there all the time, then it becomes more functional. And then the beautiful thing is that we become actually more available to ourselves, but also more available to our communities. We also communicate differently with our partners, with our spouses, with our friends, with our neighbors, because now we come from a place that is not necessarily being driven by this societal programming, where we come from anger or misunderstanding or judgment, all these things. But we stand there and we take a breath and say, hey, I actually really appreciate my neighbor. He or she might be so different than I am, but I want to learn a little bit more. I want to understand this person a little bit more because she's my neighbor. And so we give ourselves this pause point, and then we can make an intentional choice instead of going with that, what I call survival response, it's survival
Mm.
emotion, thought response.
Mm. That's such a great metaphor with the yin and the yang, and it it makes me think of another thing of my dad. He's on my mind today. One of the core features of, I think, his philosophy on life was, it was so simple, but it was peace. It was peace within, and peace without, and how being a peaceful person and feeling that sense of peace within you affects the world around you. And he embodied that. He was a peaceful man. I'd walk in on him every single morning. He'd be meditating, and he would just open his eyes and be like, "Oh, hi." And he'd be just in such a state of just love and joy. And so I think before HeartMath, before knowing the HeartMath, science and all of that, he was doing it before. And I mean, so many people, so many healers, so many, people who are into spiritual healing, or maybe they're not, they're just existing like that, have been like subconsciously doing these practices for so long. And I think it's so interesting. I think what's hard is for people to think of, like, how do I incorporate this into real life? Like, what does this look like in real life? Actually practicing it and applying it.
Yeah, and I want to also emphasize, in case, people start wondering, like, this the founder of our beautiful program, your dad, my friend, that he was all about, love and peace and just sitting there relaxed. Because the beautiful thing is when we worked hard, in the morning, and we worked with these groups, and then halfway through, I was off for the afternoon, and he phoned me and says, "Hey, what are you up to for the afternoon?" I said, "I'm not sure yet." He says, "You want a mountain bike?" And then we went on our mountain bikes. And that is also, when you talk about the yin yang, this is also, hard work and do something for yourself to relax. So I think that's really, really important, to uh, to be aware of where you're at in your life. So to be able to make choices in your life consciously, you use the word it's hard, and I hear many people say, it's hard. And it's, again, if I give you something that you don't have any tools for, let's say I'm asking you to build something and you don't have the tools, then it becomes really, really hard because you have limited resources. But if I give you the tools and you've been watching that and you get some training, then it becomes actually really joyful and it becomes fun and it becomes beautiful and you feel rewarding. And I see that the same in life in general. Some things are often being called hard if we do not have the appropriate tools that we can learn how to do that. And that's what I love with Heart Coherence. It's actually very simple. There's only mainly 3 steps really that you have to know and to practice and to get the feedback from your own body. The most sacred part of you is your heart. People call that the seat of our soul. We know that our heart is very vulnerable. It's very intelligent also. And there's a lot of studies being done around that, how the heart has access to this intuition in the field and can connect. But it's relatively simple. So the more you practice, then suddenly you begin to realize, well, maybe that self-regulation in moments where life can be really challenging is less hard because now I have the tools and I can use it. And that's what we do in our program all of the time. We keep practicing and practicing and go over that again and again, and we develop skills.
Hmm.
Like, for example, the military or former police, have been learning in their careers and they become really, really good at what they did. And it's the same what we do now. And then instead of it's a daunting task or it becomes overwhelming and hard, it now actually becomes more of a choice where you know that you're going to shift something in your life. And then you feel more confident and your brain relaxes. And then you can be more present and make
Hmm.
smarter decisions and be more creative.
Hmm. So it's
Yeah.
having the knowledge and the skills and the tools, like first learning it from someone who could teach you,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of discipline to apply it.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say this because discipline comes up a lot in our group where a person always says, I need to be disciplined. So yes, first of all, this is what I always tell the people that I work with. First of all, I want to show you the empirical science, the peer-reviewed science of how the human body works, the chemistry in the body works, and how we can potentially change it. That's one. I want you to understand that. And then you want to apply it. And then you want to repeat it. And so if you do something pure from with discipline, that can definitely work. Discipline is a good thing. Um, I like to think of it for my, maybe it's related to my personality. I'm not a very disciplined person, but maybe I am. But I like to be inspired. When you inspire me so much so that I think, I want to do this more, I want to do that more, or you feel really connected to a person and you say, I want to spend more time with you. Hey, you have time for coffee or lunch because you feel good around this person. Is that a discipline? It's not a discipline, it's something else. And that's what I personally find is that when I get inspired by other people or by knowledge, then I want to apply it. And for me, then there's almost no discipline anymore because it's almost like there's a magnet on my chest or on my forehead that I get drawn into that. And so, and for some other people, maybe it takes temporarily more discipline. And after a while, they begin to experience it feels really good. And then naturally, what makes us feel good, we want to do more, practice more.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because in CBT that's called reframing, right? Is reframing something from, oh, what's a discipline, and that invokes feelings of like, ooh, that's hard, that's something that's not super enjoyable, like, it's tough. And then changing that to being inspired, or even just like being like lucky enough, feeling grateful to be able to do something. Like it's such a great reframe. And yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think I don't always use maybe the terminology, but the reframing I think is super important for all of us. I know I naturally like to do that because there is a certain, I would say hum almost. There is a certain frequency inside of us. And then when I talk with people with who have experienced a lot of trauma, there's this expression that says waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that means actually that if you have experienced something so much so, then it becomes now an expectation. And if you experience a lot of trauma, for example, then you expect things to go wrong again. And if you try really to open up to someone and you've tried before and people let you down, you think, oh, I don't even want to open myself up. I don't want to be vulnerable because it probably happens again. But
Mhm.
then you have to be honest, if you look at the science behind that, if the opposite, you have experienced that a lot and you keep repeating that and you now you get up in the morning and you actually experience good things to happen in the day. And you have also the capacity to bring yourself back in the moment to say, no, I know good things will happen today. Maybe there are some things that I don't like, but I won't even focus on that. I won't give my attention to that. And that's a whole retraining and reframing of that. And that also takes practice. And I
Mhm.
think all of these elements, they all take practice. But we are willing to, when our phone is almost empty, we charge it. We're willing to watch the news. We're willing to go on Facebook, and we're doing. But if you would consider yourself as an energetic being, which you are, also from a really scientific point of view, and you would have this little, puppet, and you imagine yourself full of energy. You recharge that every night when you sleep. And then you place around you all of the things that we do on a daily basis. Let's say uh, we watch the news and we get upset about what's happening in the world, or we watch some feedback on Facebook, some comments, and we really don't like, and we're replying, or we talk to our brother or sister or their mom and dad or whatever that is, and we get into an argument. And so I draw these arrows away from us, and we're draining our battery, literally. We're draining our energy. And so with our phone, when we become empty, we kind of charge that. We know that we plug it. But what? And you used it before, renewing our energy. Um, how intentional are we that we have the capacity to recharge ourselves? And it's important to recharge ourselves for our physical well-being, to feel healthy enough, to stay healthy enough. but also for, and that's where we come back to your question, for our mental capacity. If we get overwhelmed, then you can try to think positive, but the body feels overwhelmed, and now there's an opposition, and that doesn't work. So you want to be in a good headspace as well. But then also on an emotional level, you want to be in a decent state that you can accomplish that. And on a grander scheme, I call that more like a spiritual well-being, where you are more open to other people's values and beliefs and how they see life and how you're willing to look at their approach. And so it's all encompassing, which is important for our well-being.
Mhm.
And it's actually simplistic to say, hey, I just want to be, positive or negative, or I just want to be focusing things in my head. We are a whole human being with a lot of different aspects, and we want to create that balanced state.
Hmm.
And that's, I believe, with HeartMath, the knowledge, the coherence, the practice, you touch on a lot of those elements.
So it almost sounds like you're talking about like there's a lot of attention on boundaries right now and how if you have no boundaries, people will just take from you and you will allow all of the things to be taken from you and you'll get depleted and burnt out. And that's why it's important to have boundaries because you need to protect yourself and protect your energy so you can not get depleted. So how do you prevent depletion? You touched on sleep and how you kind of get reset after a good night's sleep, not a bad night's sleep probably. But what are other ways to keep your energy up and fight depletion? And
Yeah. So the interesting part is we often end up in topics where I sometimes have a little bit of a different view and experience working with the most significant traumatized part of our population. Often, when we talk, for example, about protecting ourselves, setting boundaries is maybe a little different, or especially more so for women, maybe even to create this bubble, this space where you can feel safe and to protect that. And the intention behind it is really good, of course. But here's the potential challenging part is that if you understand the activity of your nervous system, if you understand the fight or flight, the two branches in your nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, one helps you to relax, the other one also always makes you feel, you need to protect. So here is the scenario. I've been taught to protect myself. I have this bubble, and if I feel you're not of a good energy or not, or maybe potentially dangerous to me, I have this bubble. And now I walk around in the world, and I walk around in this town, and I continuously try to protect myself from the bad influences. Yes, it can potentially keep me safe. But the other thing, what I know from a point of physics and physiology, is that my nervous system is always on alert. So that's the interesting part. And that's the part that usually in therapy and therapists don't always look at. So, what is it that you actually ask from your nervous system? Be on the alert, be on the alert, be on the alert. And I'm not saying it's bad, but how do you regulate that part? Because if you're always on the alert, that means is that your body is always what we call in simplistic terms fight or flight. And so, if people begin to understand that our nervous system, our entire physiology is either in fight or flight, or it's in, let's say, repair and maintenance or rest and digest. Let's take these two extremes. And you can never be all the time at one or the other. But if the body, the physiology of the body, it works this way is that you cannot be somewhere halfway in between. In our mind, we can. It says, I'm not so stressed. I'm a little stressed, but I'm not under an incredible threat. But for the nervous system, it is either in fight or flight or it's in rest and digest. So if you're a little stressed, that means is you're not in rest or digest or repair and maintenance, which means is that your body is still fighting or protecting, and it's on the alert. And when the body is on alert, when it's in a fight or flight mode, it is not looking after your digestive system. It's not looking after your immune system. It's not looking after, healing your body, which it knows to do so well. So you want to find those moments, create those moments in your day where you fully go into rest and digest, where you fully relax the nervous system, where the body can recuperate, where it can recharge. And of course, you don't do that in a potentially dangerous environment. And so, and if you now, 99% of the time that we are feeling that we have to protect ourselves, it's often a perception. All the thoughts that go through our minds, and 99% of those things will never really happen, but they still are real for our body and they perceive it. So, back to your question, is that what I personally, my body knows, my innate intelligence in my body knows when I'm in danger. When I'm crossing the street and I'm talking with someone, the body subtly stops me in my tracks because there is a car, coming and it's dangerous. The body, there is this innate part of us that looks after us most of the time if we're conscious. Then there's the other part. So most of the time, what I do is I say all of these energies, all of these negative energies, people draining my energy. I often hear that. It says, well, you can only drain your energy if you allow your energy to get drained. So I see myself as this energetic bubble where I love to feed my energy with people that I really love to be around. And if I come across people that don't serve me well, I just make myself like permeable. I make myself like being, moldable, and the energy just travels through me. And I look back, and it travels back, leaves my back. It's not my business to hold on of that to that, and that I find personally in most of the cases, maybe not in all of the cases, serves us better than always to be on the protect. That is part of our society. And I did once, I interview, well, several times, and I speak with him regularly, but the director of research at the HeartMath Institute, um, um, Dr. Roland McCready, we talked about personal resilience and personal coherence, but how that also moves into social coherence. Because the more of us who are in that place, the more we see a shift within a family, within a community, within a town, within a country, literally. And we see that now globally. We live in this time of upheaval, and everybody seems to be dysregulated in so many ways. So if you go from personal coherence more into social coherence, which helps facilitate social change, and we are all deeply connected. That's also a lot of the research of the HeartMath Institute and the Global Coherence Initiative. That's what I do with my global coherence hotspots. And so it's not only about us, but it's also about your children, about your spouse, about your neighbors. And so we help support each other in that way as well if we learn to be in a good place. And we will, and I personally believe that we will respond to the threats if they're really there. But if we're always scanning, always on the alert, that tires out our system.
Hmm. So you're saying maybe to start, it's finding moments throughout the day where you can be in a intentional coherence place where you feel connected and grounded and safe. And then, hopefully that can, I mean, if you find these moments throughout the day, obviously it's not just going to begin and then end and then, oh, dysregulate, and then, okay, finding another moment, like it will bleed throughout the day and then create a more coherent overall day, and then over time it will be more regulated throughout the day. And then you're saying it also affects the people around you, and then ultimately it's becomes this like individual to systemic thing, which is so needed obviously in these times. So it's just, that's what we love about it. I mean, it's so comprehensive, so wide reaching, but it's so simple at the same time, so practical. It's something that so many people have already been doing subconsciously for so long. So I wonder if you could just walk us through, before we leave today, just walk us through a brief exercise so people can really see and feel like what exactly you're talking about.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. And just to isolate that topic, which I think is super important, is that what you do with this little tool or exercise is you create also like a pause point in your day, where you can now make an intentional decision instead of being ruled by these emotions and this, whatever they call it sometimes, the hamster wheel that keeps on spinning and spinning, that we make an intentional choice. And what I see from all of the people that we work with, they come in so challenged and then they leave, and I talk after the program often with them, where we see them back, and I say, what did you learn the most? And they all say, we always go to our breath, always. And that's the biggest anchor for them, to take a little pause point. And so the more we learn to slow down our system, the more we create an opportunity for us to make an intentional decision. So in simple terms, and I like to keep it simple, I'm a simple guy. I like it's basically 3 steps, and we can complicate it in many ways. But first of all, we take a moment to pay attention to the way we breathe. And we know, you and I know, is that when we're stressed, we have this very superficial breathing. It's often a little rapid, and maybe we're a little clammy, we get cold, and our entire physiology is actually literally preparing us to do battle or whatever, to run. And so now we pay attention to the way we breathe and say, huh, I actually was breathing barely breathing. I was breathing very superficial, very rapidly. And so we have been doing a study that if you breathe in slowly and deeper for about 5 seconds, then something shifts in the rhythm of the heart, and which you can see, when we use all the technology. So to breathe in deeper, slower. So it basically looks like this. It's about 5 seconds. And then we exhale. We don't hold it, and we just exhale. Fully exhale, because 5 seconds. It doesn't really matter. I always recommend maybe breathing in through your nose, that most people do, and exhale through your mouth. It's about 5 seconds in, and you exhale for 5 seconds. And what we see is that the rhythm of the heart changes. We train the body and other things because we also train the resilience, because we increase the heart rate variability. If we get the training, you'll learn about that as well. But so the first step is to breathe and to slow down your breathing. And in the beginning, people often say, I don't like this breathing. I usually breathe faster, or I breathe slower, or they feel something that they don't know. It's unfamiliar, and automatically they think it's not good, because we sometimes don't even know what it feels like to be calm. So just take those breaths and sit with that. Whatever you feel, you don't have to feel good. You don't have to think positive, any of that. You just breathe. And once you get that going for a couple of minutes, usually what we do, by the way, we start yawning, because when we breathe, it's so natural. The nervous system relaxes. And when the nervous system relaxes, we see that with animals, we see that with humans, we release that and we have a yawn. Horses, though, do that. When we have the equine therapy, we see these horses release the energy. So the breathing is the first step. The second step is now where the attention goes, is where the energy flows. And we see that in all the diagrams, with the heart. We bring awareness to this area of the body. And I usually say, can you feel the air flow through your chest? I'm not saying, can you think of your heart? Can you think of anything? Because you're already often busy enough. Can you feel that air flow here? And if that's difficult for you, you place your hand on your chest and say, can you feel that hand touch your skin there? Can you feel your hand rise and fall with the breathing that you do? Is it possible for us to just for a moment get out of our own way and just allow ourselves to feel this? And so you practice that as a second step. So you add that into the already breathing that you do, and you begin to really focus on feeling that airflow. And every time your mind flows back to memories, you think about stuff, you say, okay, I can always go back to that later. I'm actually now want to practice that. You kindly come back. It's almost laser focus there. So it's a lot of focus. It's definitely not a sleepy headed state. It's not meditation at all. And then the third step that you can add into that after maybe a couple of days of practicing is maybe you can shift your emotional state. Maybe you have a lot in your mind that you have to get through during the day. But then we sit here and I look at you and I feel your presence, even though you are online. I can feel your heart. I can feel that connection between two of us. And I can feel so much appreciation for that while I feel that heart, my air flow through my chest. I don't have to go with my mind anywhere because I can feel this present moment is very unique. This moment will never come back again. So I can appreciate that. Two human beings connecting from heart to heart. And so that appreciation is an emotional state. What we've seen in the science behind the physiology changes is that it relaxes the body. Because we say, yeah, when I feel appreciation or care or love, it relaxes the system. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we see the shifts also in the rhythm of the heart. So those three steps, if we continue to do that, we close our eyes or we keep them open. And the beautiful thing in this is when you're busy at work and you think, oh, I need to take a break. I've learned this. I watched this little episode between, the two of them. I want to try that. Nobody has to, you don't have to go to the washroom for that and do something and whatever that people cannot see. You can sit there. You can look at your colleagues. You can take some breaths. You can see where they're at, but you can be here and say, no matter what work I have to do this day, I actually really appreciate my colleagues. I love working with them, or whatever you can find that you brings you into a good place, which is genuine, obviously. It's not trying to think positive or so. It's just genuine feeling and shifting that emotional state. And those three steps change a whole cascade of new emotions, or sorry, new chemistry in the body, new neurochemistry. So the heart rhythm changes, signals the brain releases chemistry in the body, and you give yourself that dose, which stands for release of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. And so now you self-regulate and wait, instead of waiting for your environment to change, because that's seemingly what we always do. If he's nice to me, then I'm in a good place. If he's not nice, I'm not. Now you self-regulate, and now you give yourself the message, like, I have the capacity to do something about my internal state. I don't need to wait for my environment to shift. And that's kind of the practice.
I love it. I yawn every time.
And I love that you yawn, because then it shows me also that your body is relaxing in that moment. And that's often much needed for all of us, because we live in a fast-paced society.
Mhm.
And it's not really realistic, I would say. When I see people moving away from everything or sit on a mountaintop for 6 hours a day and meditate, it's nice, but it's usually not very functional in the way we live. But we can take those little, what I call, we create those little islands of coherence throughout our day, and we sail to the next island, and we sail to the next one. And then we are in control of how, wherever the wind blows from. I'm a big sailor, from the Netherlands. And so we have this rudder and we have an anchor, and that's basically what we can use and to set course to the next island. And we take a pause instead of feeling overwhelmed for the entire ocean that we have to cross. You think, oh, I like it here. It's beautiful. The palm trees, and I feel the sand between my toes, feel the sun on my back. Yeah, let's go for the next trip, to break it up. And then it's not so overwhelming.
I love it. There's so many amazing metaphors from this conversation today. We had the
Yeah.
yin and the yang. We had the two wolves, sailing, like so many good ones, and so helpful to really bring it to life. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of really, really helpful information today. And it's funny because it's such a, we could talk forever about this topic, and we often do. And it's so simple, but it's so just complicated at the same time, but in a beautiful way. Like, not complicated, just comprehensive, maybe it would be a better word. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I think it's so helpful to have, someone from a boots on the ground perspective who has all of the theory, but applies it on a daily basis, not only personally, like you really embody this stuff, but really with, other people, human to human, and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And I think that's why we really wanted to do these webinars, was because we were shocked about having such, not shocked, but pleasantly surprised maybe at the amazing results that we're getting, and wondering like why aren't other, you know, treatment alternatives getting these kinds of results. And I think it's the disconnect from, you know, the academics in the Ivy Tower who are saying this is what works because of the study, and the people on the ground who are really in the trenches doing, applying things and seeing what works and what doesn't. So it's just a perfect, you know, combination of the two. And I just thank you so much for all of your wisdom and your presence.
Thank you, and I appreciate your saying that. And I'm always really pleasantly again surprised that in 4 weeks' time, we get the most trained, most smart and advanced in their careers, people that I work with. And initially, they potentially have a bit of a resistance to an approach that they've never been being exposed to. And now I look at them, we're in the last week now, and I see the amazing conversations that they have and the willingness to go into terrain that they've never been into, and how it supports them. And it's not just it is therapy, but at the same time, it's also embracing real life and bring, examples in there. And with the islands and the sailing, I often use that when I was leading a team of about 400 people, back in Europe, within a big corporation, and they felt overwhelmed by all of the targets and all the tasks and the new training. And I literally created that visual for them. I say, it's too much, the entire ocean, but I want you to produce at the highest level. And therefore I give you the tools, but you can only go to the next island and the next and the next. You have to break things down in smaller pieces for us to be able to be at our best, to rest a little bit and go to the next. Otherwise, we're just fools, just trying to swim across the ocean and tiring ourselves out and never reaching the other part. So I'm not only saying this from a piece of, feeling good and all that. I was working and still I'm working, in the highest level of performance that we do with the people here in the program, which I did in corporate life. But I've heard once something and it 100% resonates with me, and maybe we can close with that. But life is simple, but the seeker of life is often complex. And it resonated so much so with me that if you make things simple, then often people resonate more with it and it sticks more than trying to make it so complex.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I think you have to meet people where they're at, and offer, you know, other alternative ways of maybe seeing a situation or a way of being. And that's, you know, HeartMath is just such a, it's like a way of being. And yeah, I just thank you so much for really bringing this to our lives, to our program. And we've impacted so many people's lives with these principles and your work. So thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, likewise. It's mutual. The feeling is mutual. And thank you so much for doing this and hosting this. I so appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Dirk. Okay, well, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you soon.
Bye bye.